Hi, I'm Stacey and welcome to the Book Nook. And today we're going to be discussing Flowers for Algernon. We're going to be reviewing this, and please beware there will be spoilers. So just to sum Flowers for Algernon up, this is a book by Daniel Keyes. It was written in 1959, or published in 1959. This book follows Charlie, who has an operation which makes him more intelligent, and it explores his relationships with people and how the experiment changes him and what he views the world as. The good parts of this, it has a really good exploration of familial relationships, and the perspective changes as Charlie kind of goes through the book. You can see at the beginning he doesn't quite know what's going on and he doesn't even remember his family, but as he goes through it he gains more memories and he can learn things, and you kind of learn as Charlie goes, and then it really delves in deep to the relationship with each member of his family. I enjoyed that it had a representation of both intellectual and emotional intelligence, and how Charlie struggles with them in different ways. We see that he gets intellectually intelligent much faster than emotionally intelligent, and it's quite interesting seeing how this plays out in his life and relationships. It looks at things like trauma, bullying, and what else? Manipulation quite deeply, and how it affected Charlie even when he had a lower IQ and how he sees it with a higher IQ. And the way this is done is carefully, so it's done quite well in my opinion. I enjoyed the use of Algernon, who is the mouse. Algernon's journey is basically what's about to happen to Charlie, but it manifests in a different way because he's a mouse. And I liked their relationship and how Charlie has this bond with Algernon. And I enjoyed that we learned alongside of Charlie, even though we can see things that he can't at the beginning because he hasn't had this operation yet. I also enjoyed the ideas on what makes us human and what can be seen to make us less than, and how we treat people. It really made me think about how the world treats people that they deem as stupid and how they may feel. It's also really heartbreaking seeing Charlie just learning that people weren't as nice to him as he thought they were. Like, he thought he had so many friends, but these people were just being abusive and bullying him, and they weren't really his friends. And it was interesting seeing how he kind of surpasses them. So it does kind of hit you in the feels a little bit with that side of things, and also as he deteriorates, it's just really heartbreaking. Okay, now we're on to the bad stuff. So, I did feel that some of the story meandered and wasn't necessary. Some of it I just didn't see why it was relevant to the story. And I understand that's kind of, some people just write like that. It was more a thing back then. This was written over 60 years ago, so different times really, isn't it? So in some ways it's very much a story that is ahead of its time. In the late 50s People were not treated as well as they are today. Ooh, let's put that back up. People weren't treated as well as they were today. Um, the some of the language used in this book says the R word, and I cringed every time. I hated it so much. And although it very much the book itself hinges on like how everybody is human and we should treat everybody with the respect that they deserve, it was kind of jarring to have that theme and yet still be using that language. But I totally understand that's how it was in those days. Like, you could use that word and it wasn't seen as a bad thing, it was just normal. So it was quite outdated and offensive. I didn't like some of the way that women were treated in the book, which also felt quite outdated and also offensive in some places. It just made me quite deeply uncomfortable. The ideas of relationships and the way that the women were either very meek, very motherly, or abusive, and those were kind of, there weren't too many facets to them, and the men were explored in much more detail, in my opinion. So, this is a big one. I don't know how much the author thought of the ethical implications of having Charlie have a relationship with a woman who was teaching him before he became more intelligent. Because to me, that made me feel a little bit sick. It kind of reminds me of grooming behaviours. Although in the book she does say no, we can't have a relationship until you've progressed a bit more. But that still seems to me like, yeah, he was in love with her when he had the mental capacity of a 6-year-old, and it's kind of carried on into when he has the mental capacity of someone much older. I don't know whether the time period might have meant that people would see that kind of thing a bit differently, but for me, that was a no go. And I feel like even in those days, that's it should be controversial. So also something that is very much a product of the time is this centres on animal testing and also human testing. So it's quite inhumane. There's some talk about a lot of animals being kept in the cages and being tested and having surgeries. There's not loads of talk of it, but enough to make me think, wow, the standards have really changed in that, because nowadays that's not a normal thing. We don't like animal testing if we can help it. And then the human trials, there should have been a lot more testing before human trials. So that was quite interesting to me and made me quite uncomfortable again. So my overall thoughts. I gave this book 3 stars because some of the themes were interesting. I quite enjoyed it for the most part. I managed to get through it, didn't DNF it. I thought a lot of the general ideas behind it were really well thought out, and it was a thought-provoking story, and it made you see things a bit differently, made you question things, which is always good. I can totally see why it's a sci-fi classic, although it's not too heavy on the sci-fi. But once you try to judge it by today's standards, it doesn't quite hold up. I can see why it would be an important piece at the time. I assume it made people question things and open their minds to different ideas, and it does pull at the heartstrings and make you reflect. So that is everything. That's all of my thoughts. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Just going to wait for this jet to go by. Here we go again.